I'm Dave Poltorak. I'm with Rockwell Collins, located in Annapolis, Maryland, Vice President of Business and Government Aviation Services. So we've got a remarkable panel here this morning to talk to us about the art of business aircraft management. I'll ask them each to introduce themselves briefly in just a minute. But first, maybe just to kind of set the stage for what we were asked to talk about, what the panel is going to talk about today. First theme or thread was, do customers know what they want when it comes to aircraft management? And as we talked about this last week, we thought we'd start instead with, when is it best for an aircraft management company to get involved with a customer? We've also got another thread, talk about economies of scale as relates to aircraft management. And then finally, what could be another very interesting part of the conversation is consolidation as well. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Brian Kirkdoffer. I'm the CEO and owner of Lacy Aviation. I've been there for 29 years and involved in the aircraft management side of it for 25 years.
Good morning. My name is Myles, CEO of SkyService Business Aviation. We based in Canada, in Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Ottawa. We operate FBOs and aircraft management as well.
Good morning, Jonah Adler, Jet Edge International, based in Van Nuys. We operate 60 large cabin aircraft.
Good morning, Bob Marinace. I'm the Executive Vice President of Solairus Aviation. We're an aircraft management and charter company. We were founded in 2009, and we operate just over 160 aircraft throughout the U.S.
Good morning. Ihlefeld with Gama Aviation. I'm the Senior Vice President of Aircraft Management. We're based, headquartered in Connecticut with operations all over the U.S. where we operate a fleet of about 210 airplanes nationwide.
Great. Well, thank you all for being on the panel. Alistair, my compliments to you for pulling together such a remarkable panel as well. So Brian, I'll ask you maybe to kick off the conversation. Rather than do customers know what they want, from your perspective, when is it best to engage with owners and potential new customers as relates to aircraft management?
So you can't get the management company engaged too early. So we inherit the relationship for the long term. Management companies are a great partner with the OEMs, with the influencers, with the aircraft tax attorneys. So the earlier we get in and kind of help understand what the client's goals are, we can help support that and make sure that the ownership experience is as good as it possibly can be for the long term.
So Casey, when we were chatting last week, you were making a distinction between some of the owners, some being primarily focused on asset management, others perhaps more on charter and the opportunity to derive revenue from their aircraft. Does this, as you look at the different types of customers that are out there and their focuses, does that change when you might want to get involved with a new potential customer?
It does, David. There are, as Brian pointed out, the earlier we get involved, the better, because not only are we looking at, a relationship that we're really going to be spearheading and kind of, delivering the customer experience, but we also need to get in there to talk about and set expectations. So we want to know as much about the client and their needs and how that fits with our model so that we can tailor a solution that appropriately fits for them.
Bob, are there good customers and bad customers? And without naming any of them, how might you distinguish?
Yeah, we love all our customers, right? So I think it's really important to understand why they're buying an airplane, how they got to this point, and their decision. And with aircraft values, especially on some of the older aircraft being where they are, I think it's very enticing to some people to say, hey, I'm going to jump into ownership. And some of these people probably don't belong in aircraft ownership. And we all have those calls where somebody has the idea they're going to put 500 hours of charter on this airplane and use it themselves 50 hours. So, that type of person, you probably want to talk them out of it.
We send those guys to Bob.
I'm sorry, you send them to Bob?
Send those guys to Bob.
Here we go. Jonah, how about owner expectations? Are they changing? And one of the trends I think that we've talked about a bit is that there's a younger generation of owners. And how do you see that changing expectations, or do you see changing expectations?
I think for us at JetEdge, our average owner's net worth is, the low to mid 9 figures. So, we see owners that are pretty clear in terms of what they want and what they expect, the type of transparency that they expect. I think transparency is a word that is part of every conversation now that we have with new owners. They want, whether it's charter quotes, they want to see the breakdowns, they want to understand how we make our money in every part of the business, whether it's maintenance, charter, management. These are people that are used to a level of service that is, the highest level that exists on the planet. When it comes to this asset, which is one of their largest, holdings, they expect a service level that is as good as they receive in their private banking life, in their hospitality life. These are people that are spending, $7,000 to $10,000 a night to sleep in a hotel, $50,000 a night when they travel and sleep on a yacht in the Med. So their expectation in terms of how flights are dispatched, how the customer service team handles, his wife's birthday in the air, the expectations are very, very high. And we see that only, as we continue to focus on ultra long-range aircraft, we see those expectations rising. And I think with technology playing a part in the kind of service levels that people get outside of aviation, their expectation is that, we would be following suit, right? That we would have technology that allows us to stay connected to the owners in a way that they're used to in the rest of their lives.
Marshall, could you comment on expectations as well? And I also wanted to add to that, how important is safety when customers are looking to select a management company? Is it something that is assumed, or is it something that actually can be and is a differentiator and a discriminator?
So I would tell you that safety, I'm sure to everybody in this room as it is to us, safety is paramount in our industry. There's nothing that's more important than safety. So for us, we're very committed. We were one of the first in Canada. We manage just over 75 mid to heavy aircraft in our market, and we're very integrated in terms of we don't outsource, we outsource very little. So from aircraft management to charter to brokerage to maintenance, we do it all. So we have a lot of responsibilities with our clients. So we take the business very seriously in terms of safety, and then safety comes along with your other point about expectations. Expectations are very high on all fronts of how we manage the business and how we take care of the clients. So everything to us, we have a very, I would say, a very sophisticated group of flyers that fly internationally. So having the right touch points, where they go, where you send them, what their experience is like, to Jonah's point of where people stay, the accommodations they're used to, the detail. Our flight department has sent people all over the world. In our past, we've owned an air ambulance business that brought us to many touch points around the globe, so that gave us great contacts and relationships. So very, very important, and the key to all of our businesses.
You've led into another question I had when you talked about you do so much yourself as relates to the operation. A question for the panel in general. Are there certain functions that you think must be insourced? Maybe it's everything, maintenance, you name it, or are there certain parts of the operation that you think must be done within house and others that you could easily outsource?
That's a difficult question because for us, we certainly work on both sides of it. We're a large operator in Canada. The aircraft that are larger airplanes, we work very closely. We're the service center for Bombardier, for Gulfstream, and for Falcon as well. So we work closely with the OEMs. We send a lot of work to them as well. But at the same time, a lot of our clients like to know that we're responsible ultimately for all the services that we provide. So whether it's something that someone is AOG or it's a charter flight that's critical to get out, that quality of service and that expectation, it's nice when you can control it yourself.
So we've taken a different approach to that, and those who know Solairus, we don't sell gas. We're not in the retail maintenance business. We don't own hangars. So we are truly an aircraft management charter company. And once we agree on our fee with the client, we're sitting on the same side of the table. And we view that as our advocacy, and we're now a buyer of services for them. And we like that model. It's very transparent. And we feel it develops a much more personal relationship with the client, because this is a very personal business. And instead of viewing us as someone who's maybe selling them something, again, we're their advocate, and we're just a buyer.
Great. I'm just looking at the question here. We'll come back to that. Economies of scale, I wanted to touch on that a bit. When I looked at the websites for all of your companies, I think all of your companies made clear that there's the opportunity for your customers to benefit from your buying power, and for you to share that buying power in the form of savings with the customers. So when you think about economies of scale, is that a factor as you go about seeking new business and as you filter through your new potential customers? Do you look for customers perhaps that only are interested in one particular airframe or in a particular location, or are you happy for a new customer wherever they might be, whatever they might own? Brian, if I could start with you.
Well, so economies of scale. So we operate about 105 aircraft, and the value that we can offer our clients today is so much better than we could 20 years ago. Whether it's fuel, insurance, all of those things add to that. But also, I'd say in economies of scale, there's also economies of scope, which Marshall talked a little bit about how they do it. We do kind of the same thing. So we do maintenance, interiors, avionics. We've been an owner and operator for 50 years. And so we learned to have the highest dispatch reliability and the greatest operational efficiency. You need to have 24-hour access to those critical components that keep that aircraft flying. Doesn't mean we don't outsource in other areas, but on those critical items, we've learned that that's the best way to operate these aircraft. It also gives, one of the discussion points, and we may talk about it, but is the shortage of mechanics and pilots. So by having economies of scale, by having economies of scope, you now can create career paths for pilots. So we have line service people that become mechanics. We have mechanics that become flight operations. We operate 43 different, kind of to your point, we operate 43 different types of airplanes. So you can start with us as a co-pilot, like I did, in a small jet, and you can go all the way up to airline-sized aircraft. So you can truly outline a career, which we feel is a competitive advantage for people that can go between departments and stay for a long time in one company.
I would just add that one of our core responsibilities as a management company is to create value for the client. So economies of scale definitely become a big picture item as they go through your value proposition. But it can't be about all economics. It's got to be about culture. It's got to be about safety. It's got to be about the guy sitting across the table. Does he believe and trust in you and your ability to deliver a service that he requires? And if you can check all those boxes and create a real value proposition for them, everything kind of shares equally across the board in the decision-making process.
Let's pull a little bit on the thread around the people, and this will lead into a bit of the discussion around the market and the consolidation. So, Brian, you commented on the challenge, or maybe a bit of a shortage in some of the different areas. How do you see this? Is this likely to, or perhaps stunt the growth of your businesses, the shortage of people, or are you able to find them from other companies, or have you devised your own processes for ensuring you've got the right kind of people for the jobs you need? Jonah, do you want to comment?
Sure. I think it's twofold for us at JetEdge. First, on the business side, we continue to bring people in from outside of aviation, and have had a lot of success bringing in people with, sophisticated operating experience in mature industries that leverage technology and, industries that probably have more, capital investment on the business side than aviation. And on the aviation side, we're investing and continuing to invest in recruiting programs, particularly for pilots, which is an issue for everybody sitting on this stage. And we found that by investing in the platform and investing in recruiting programs and really making sure we define what it means to be a pilot at Jet Edge, building that culture, building a program that attracts the right talent, people that aren't going to leave, and programs to really make sure they stay. That we found that even in a pilot shortage environment, we're able to make the hires we need. We're paying more than we'd like. We've seen some crazy numbers over the last 45 days. 295, 305 for global pilots, stuff that we've never seen before. But we're finding great pilots, and I think it's just a matter of having the infrastructure and making the investment in a program.
Bob, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, obviously a lot of discussion at this event around pilot and mechanic hiring, and it's certainly a challenge. It takes a lot longer, but if you look back 10 years ago when pilots were looking at jobs, they'd come along and say, okay, you've got a G450 and this is the salary. Boy, sounds great. I'll take it. And now they're obviously much more focused on quality of life. So we spend a lot of time in the recruiting and hiring phase to make sure we're getting the right match for the client. And that means the pilot's questions are, hey, how does this guy fly? Is this a personal airplane? Is this a business airplane? How old are his kids? Because they want to know, are these kids in school? Which means they're going to follow the school holidays. And they're going to go to the vacation spots. And if the pilots have young kids, that means that, dad or mom's going to be away. So these are the questions we're seeing now that you just didn't see that before. And on the flip side, we highly encourage our clients when in the hiring process, you got to meet these guys. You have to spend some time with them and make sure it's a right fit. Because turnover is really expensive, it's disruptive, and if you spend the time up front, we find that retention is really good. And we are very fortunate. Our fleet is primarily the super mids and the large cabin aircraft. These are really good jobs. These are really good accounts. So once you get the right fit, this is a good spot to be, and we don't see them looking over the horizon at, okay, what's next for me? I think the other interesting thing that we're starting to see is, the draw to the airlines for pilots. And we've actually seen guys take airline jobs and then 7-8 months later turn around and come back because they're bored out of their minds. I mean, how many times can you shoot approach into Charlotte and, today I'm flying with you and tomorrow I'm flying with you and I may never see this guy again, So they're all back to the quality of life issue, doing what you enjoy doing. So again, it's a challenge, the hiring, but I'm slightly optimistic on the future and what this means with all the technology and all the discussions we've had, involving the draw to aviation. And again, young people now are drawn to technology. So the aircraft that are being produced now, again, that's a really interesting job. So.
Marshall, I think you had commented the other day as well on some of the challenges with good people going to the airline.
Well, we all talk about the shortage, of course, of engineers, pilots. We have the same situation. We're fortunate in that we just celebrated our 33rd anniversary. And again, similar to Brian's business, we have a lot of long-term employees. We have a lot of team that have been with us for 10 years, 20 years. We've had some crew that have been with us over 30 years. It makes a big difference. We, the culture, as Jonah was just saying a few minutes ago, culture is everything as well. So the environment that somebody could work for a client for 10 years and move on to a larger plane, or their needs change, something different. So there's a good career path to stay with us. So, again, it's that loyalty, the long-term, It's always a struggle bringing in new people, but there's great opportunities. And I think being in business a long time and having that history and reputation that we all work hard to build is very important, because again, that goes back to that personal relationship again. So
I want to use this to lead into a bit of discussion specifically around consolidation. And do you think that the challenges with finding and keeping good people, and perhaps also the regulatory requirements that are just becoming ever more complex, do you think that that may drive some of the smaller management companies out of business?
you want me to take that first?
Sure.
So I would say definitely yes. There's no question. I think as a group sitting here, we're all going to tell you that we've all seen our costs rise substantially. And along with the cost, we want to be innovative. We want to bring new programs. We want to bring quality. We want to have that personal relationship. And I think that'll be very difficult to maintain as a very small operator, not having the infrastructure, not being able to attract the quality people that we all want to have in our groups. So very important.
Maybe I can then flip that around. Do you see acquisitions as a way to, well, certainly lead to consolidation, but also to achieve economies of scale? Or does it not really work that way in this industry?
I think it's very tough. So we acquired a company, Kier, which is a 30-year-old company, great culture, great people, 2 years ago. And it truly took 5 times as much resources as I expected, right? And I thought we were aligned very closely. So it's a relationship business, and it's very hard to scale relationships. But I do think the trend will continue. So in the last 6 months, I've had 3 companies come to me with less than 25 aircraft and say, will you do with us what you did with Kier? And most of it's because these companies, one, they don't have the same scale as those of us on stage, but 2, they've been built by someone that's been passionate about it, that's really been driving those relationships for a long time, and they get tired, and there isn't a replacement. So there's typically some investor at some point who says, okay, where's the next life for this company, right? We're not making a lot of money, but we have these relationships, we have these great clients. What do we do with them? And that's where I do think you'll see continued consolidation. But it's kind of interesting, if you look at the top 10 management companies, add up the aircraft that we have less than 10% of the applicable market, right? So economies of scale, what other industry can you take the top 10 by number of aircraft or by number of anything, and you have less than 10% of that market? So we have a long way to go. I think there's a big opportunity. I just think it's going to be very challenging in a relationship business to just go out. I don't think you just go out and acquire companies and bring them in easily.
Any other thoughts or comments on that, Jonah?
Yeah, I think I disagree with Brian a little bit. I think there's an opportunity in any highly fragmented space for consolidation. I mean, aviation is not unique to a business that's driven by relationships. I mean, look at any sales-driven businesses. You've got the sales guys who have relationships with the customers. In this case, the relationship with owners might run a bit deeper. We've kind of become part of their families. No doubt that presents challenges. But we view the opportunity for consolidation in the management space to be a significant one. And I think when really good, private equity gets involved in any space, they have the kind of resources that allow for consolidation to be successful. And I think aircraft management has seen some unsuccessful stories out there from the past, but we believe in consolidation in the future. And it might be a good opportunity while we're all sitting up here on stage to start a mega merger conversation and see how that goes, make this interesting, throw some numbers out there.
Okay, I'm turning it over to you guys.
Somebody turn off his microphone, please.
Let's rock and roll. Let's do this.
Go ahead, Bob.
So consolidations are tough, okay? I participated and led several consolidations, and they're hard. Most of us in the operating side of this business came from the pilot maintenance ranks. So as an industry, I think we tend to focus on the regulatory pieces in consolidation. So I've got 2 certificates, I have to figure this out, I've got to get my pilots trained, all those things that have to happen with a purchase of a company. And those things are important, they absolutely have to happen, but there's a process for that, there's a checklist. And if you follow your process and the checklist and work with the FAA and they're cooperative, you'll get it done. But what happens in a lot of these consolidations that fail are they don't look at, and there's the buzzword right on the screen in front of me, culture. And there's no checklist for culture. There's, it's inherent, and it's really hard to acquire a company and then instill your culture in it. And again, I'll go back to what I said before. This is a very personal business. At the end of the day, we all do the same thing, right? We can hire pilots, we can schedule aircraft, we can pay bills. That's not incredibly hard to do. But to develop those relationships with your client, it comes directly from your culture. So, we took a different approach for our growth, and we did everything organically and invested in people and relationships and marketing and all those other things to develop the business. But, back to your comment, size matters in this business, certainly when you're a purchaser and you're able to get better deals on fuel and training and insurance, and you can pass that through to your client.
Thank you. Casey, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to point out or add that the opportunities for consolidation always exist, but when you're looking at it, there has to be strategic value in order to even engage in that, not just for your company and your employees, but for your clients. Economies of scale, that helps. That's great, but to Brian's point, we went through an acquisition of Landmark a year and a half ago or 18 months ago, and the amount of resources it's taken to just kind of integrate the whole thing, not just the people and the processes, but the cultures. It's been monumental. So it's a big undertaking, but if there's strategic value for you and your company and your clients, then it's something to be considered, and there are opportunities out there.
If we could put back up the question that the panel had for the audience, give you guys a chance to, this is the word, I forget what that's called. Okay. We had a question for the audience, and what do the audience view as being important in a management company? I wanted to just pause for a second and ask the panel to react to what they're seeing here on the screen in terms of what the audience sees as being important in a management company. Is it what you would expect, or is there anything missing from what you would have expected?
I think it's exactly what I'd expect. You look at culture and you look at expertise, and they go back to the perception of who's going to give us the safest flight operation. Who's going to be there when times are tough, who's going to be there for the long term. And I think those kind of help define what I think clients look for in a management company.
I think the brand piece is really important. There's so much touch in this business. If I'm a broker or any of the people out there who recommend management companies, every owner is so different. And the difference between a guy who's self-made and just sold his company to a Fortune 10 CEO who's been that for 35 years, just very, very different animals. And I think the companies up on this stage are all very, very different animals. I mean, we all feel very different from a client perspective. So I think each one of the brands that are sitting up here are very, very different brands, just like every owner is very different. So I think that understanding the management company's brand and who they are is really critical to making the right decision in terms of who an owner should be managed by. I mean, it's just very, very high touch.
Marshall, did you want to comment?
So the only thing I would add to that is that, transparency, awareness, the sophistication of our clients, the sophistication of the people around them. The industry's changed a lot in terms of that knowledge base. We all have clients looking to, when they first decide to buy an airplane, they're on controller or they're looking or they're talking to their friends that are experts. So they're coming into this very well equipped. And I think that the expectation of quality and service and integrity, that's exactly where I believe we would all want to be as a group, no question.
Any other comments on what we're seeing here, Bob?
Yeah, I think all those points are relevant. What we really value is what we call the influencer network, and really that network is, 90% of the people in this room, whether you're a broker or a consultant, on the financial side, typically these aircraft decisions originate with you guys, and you're asked for recommendations on what should I do for management. And I think you guys take all these things into account, but you also know your client, and you pick and recommend companies based on what you see as being a good fit, and that to us is very valuable. A certain broker that we all do business with, one time said, "Hey, Bob, we've got this opportunity, but I don't think you guys are a fit." And at first I got a little insulted by it, but then when I thought about it, I'm like, okay, you're right. Maybe there's a different platform for this individual, and rather than force fit something into our model that doesn't fit, and we're going to have a mutual bad experience here, maybe it's better for brand B or whatever it is. So I think those are all important, and I think they change based on the client.
Great. Why don't we take some of the audience questions now? We haven't talked about the charter sales. Why don't we try and tackle that one? What's your biggest pain point or points within charter sales? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Sure.
Okay, Casey will.
I was going to say, probably for us, there's so much supply out there right now, and it's driving prices down to points that are, they don't make sense for our clients. They're not going to put their airplanes out at charter rates just to get the business. They want quality business, they want quality trips, and they want a fair price. Mm-hmm. So that's a big one.
Jonah?
I think, so much of our business is large cabin, most of our business is large cabin charter. And we compete in a segment where there are operators that are chartering planes at prices that just don't work to be profitable, mm-hmm. With the kind of infrastructure we have. So we were really investing in educating our clients on what value really means in charter, why the safety infrastructure that we have, and really everybody on this stage has, is really critical to value, whether it's maintenance or safety or pilots, training. There's so much that goes into every single flight that gets dispatched when it's dispatched by a world-class operator. And you don't get that value when you're not flying with a world-class operator. So educating charter clients on what those things are, how much they really cost, and why $47.50 an hour as a retail rate for a 2004 G4 SB doesn't work. That's not a real number. It's not sustainable. So we're working hard to try to educate the market on the end user side on what the right number is and why that's what it should cost. So it's been interesting.
Marcia, you looked like you had something to add to that.
Well, just the traditional answer to add to that, and I agree with everything that we're all saying, we still do have challenges sometimes in terms of owner approval and the time delays, just because you need instant response, and sometimes that's very difficult to achieve.
All right. What else we have here? I like this one. What would make a new entrant successful? Nobody wants to share their secrets.
Me entrant into management.
That's how I'm interpreting that question.
A lot of money. I think it's very difficult to do for the reasons we talked about. You know, you look at the words there, experience. You can't buy experience. You can't buy culture.
Yep.
So, you know, I think if you want to be an entrant, you'd have to acquire someone on this panel or someone that should be on this panel, right? That has those things if they want to, you know, if they really want a successful and ongoing business. I think that would be a very tough one to do.
Is there, in your view, a critical mass if somebody's looking to get started or looking to be a successful management company? Is there a number, 50 aircraft, 20 aircraft, 100? Do you guys have a view on whether there's a threshold at which point you hit that critical mass?
I mean, there's definitely scope and scale and critical mass because, you know, if you're a one airplane operator, you still need the three wise men, which is, you know, your chief pilot, your DO, your DOM. You have to have those things. And certainly in today's environment with complexity, you have to have people who are well-versed in international procedures. You have to have safety programs. So that's really hard to do if you have one airplane. You know, I found personally, it just seems like 50 airplanes is kind of the magic number. And, you know, once you get over that hurdle, then I think you start to see more and more economies of scale. And just going back, you know, to the question, for new entrants, you know, my recommendation would be if you were going to be crazy enough to get into this business, stick to what you're really good at and keep it very narrow and don't try and be everything to everybody, you know. Pick a niche for yourself and go with that.
So just to add to that quickly, I would say that the benefit of scale for us, and we've all seen the same thing, is that it allows us to do certain things that an individual or one or two aircraft management company couldn't do. So whether it's pilots covering for each other on vacations, whether it's borrowing a part or a tool or knowledge about something else, so that sharing economy internally with all of our clients and our team makes a big difference and makes much more reliability.
Super. All right, we got a couple minutes left here. Let's keep the question here. The shift to the sharing economy and pilot shortage, will more owners gravitate towards management companies? Anybody have a view on that you want to share?
Well, I'll take that one on. You know, again, the world is a very complex place now. And, you know, I started my career in the days of two pilots and a mechanic operating an airplane. And back then it was easy. And the world's complicated. And these are very, very complex operations. So I think those days are definitely numbered. And it's hard. So why wouldn't you partner with somebody who has that expertise, who has that infrastructure that you can be part of and take advantage of?
Yeah, the change that we've seen is more about more and more clients are looking at risk mitigation. You know, so why do it themselves when there are management companies out there who are designed and built to do just that, and they're getting smarter and they recognize scale and economies of scale and you know, risk mitigation factors, training programs, and just a regulatory infrastructure within the management company that is designed to keep them clean every step of the way.
Go ahead, Jonah.
I think as aircraft management companies become more sophisticated, like I think all of our companies are every day, and as consumers become more sophisticated, you look at the opportunity to offset costs with charter, and you know how we as management companies are able to educate consumers on what that really looks like. And you know, when someone who owns a $5 million asset realizes they can offset their cost by $500,000 to $750,000 a year, the numbers are real. So I think, you know, our ability to get in front of those those end users and explain that to them in a way that they understand and make them feel safe with that kind of offset is an important part of how more end users come to management companies. And on the crewing side, with the current environment, it will continue to be very, very hard to attract and maintain the right crew, especially for large cabin aircraft, without a large management company. So I think it's a good question.
Okay, well, we're out of time. Thank you all for being a part of the panel. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, but these 5 gentlemen will be here, I think, for a bit longer today, so grab them at lunch. Thank you again. And Alistair, I think we turn it over now. Okay, thank you.